Music in the Morgan Manor, the life and music of Russ Morgan. With the music of Russ Morgan and the words of Mrs. Shirley Morgan.
Hello, folks. This is Russ Morgan. Before we start the show, I just want to say hello and thanks for joining us. We have some smooth arrangements of some great song hits on tap for today, and we hope you like them. So without wasting any more time, here we go with our first number.
Welcome to part 1 of 3 in this series looking at the life of American musician and bandleader Russ Morgan. Russ was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania on April 29, 1904, and started his working life as a coal miner and then became a cinema pianist. In November 1995 I was privileged to conduct an interview with Russ Morgan's widow, Mrs. Shirley Morgan, during a trip to Melbourne. We'll hear this enlightening interview interspersed with Russ's music in this series. I spoke to Shirley at her city hotel. Shirley, welcome to Australia. How many times have you been here now?
This is my third time, Alex, and it's a pleasure. I enjoy it more each time I come here. The people are wonderful to me.
Yes, I've visited you in Las Vegas, and I always find the people over there very warm, so it's nice to have it reciprocated, isn't it?
Yes, well, you're a pleasure to know, and you're so nice to work with that people enjoy it.
Do you find the climate a problem? How do you accustom? I know in Las Vegas it's very warm and you almost live in an air-conditioned climate.
Oh, you have to. Frankly, I was surprised. I thought you were going into summer here, and it's rather cool and damp and cold.
Well, this is Melbourne.
But I thought Melbourne, but I thought Australia being down under that this was going into your summer, but it's not.
We have a thing about Melbourne that if it's not to your liking 1 hour, wait and it'll change.
Get the 4 seasons in one day.
Shirley, we're going to talk a bit about, a lot, hopefully, about your late husband, Russ Morgan, and his band. But let's talk a little bit about the early days. And I understand that you were working for Brunswick Records back in
Yes.
the 30s.
Yes, right after I graduated from college, I wanted to go to work for Brunswick Records because I always was a fan of all the singers, and I used to practice my shorthand and typing by listening to the singers. Rudy Valley's vocals were wonderful. His diction was marvelous, so I used to write everything in shorthand and then type it back, and my teachers thought I was brilliant because I was always very busy, but I wanted to be in that field. And my uncle was the personnel manager of Brunswick Records, and I wanted to get a job there. He didn't want me in that business. He said, I don't want you in here. It's not a good business. Show business is not for you. And I persevered, and I told him I couldn't get a job anyplace else. And he said, well, if you absolutely can't get a job anyplace, come here. So I went around very half-heartedly, and I tried to get jobs and couldn't, or didn't take them. And I called my uncle. I said, I can't get a job any place. He said, well, all right, come here. And I started to work there the same week that Russ started to work there, but neither one of us knew that. And he would come into the secretarial pool office, and he'd ask me a question, and I'd say, I'm sorry, I don't know. And he'd say, where do you get the recordings? And I said, I'm sorry, I don't know. And then I would go back into the recording room where he would be in charge of the controls, and I'd ask him a question. He'd say, I'm sorry, I don't know. So he said, you know, for somebody who works here, you really don't know where anything is. I said, I just started working this week. And he said, so did I. So that sort of made, we were babes in the wood together. But he was the recording manager and director there.
Oh, yes, yes. Now, Brunswick Records in New York, I think they were, from memory, weren't they based in Chicago? Wasn't the head office in Chicago?
No, I think the head office was in New York City, yes.
Was it?
They probably had several offices around the country. They'd have one down south, that would be their Southern, and they'd have another place down near Nashville would be their Rhythm and Blues. Their main factory was in New Jersey, where they had those big, now the recordings are so wonderful, but at that time you did a recording on acetate, which was about an inch thick and a great, great big 13 or 15 inches around. And if they made a mistake, you just had to destroy the tape, send it back to New Jersey, melt them over again.
Right.
It's nothing like now with the DAT and with the tapes and everything where you can just edit something so beautifully.
Yes, it has changed a lot, hasn't
Yes.
it? Now, Russ, as you say, was the recording manager there. You had an interesting job. You were telling me you used to type up the labels, I think.
Yes, that was an idiot job. We typed up the labels. I say sometimes you might be seeing a label that I typed, but it had to be absolutely perfect. You couldn't have a matrix number that was wrong.
Right.
We had to type the label with the matrix number, with the artist name, and the name of the song and the title of the song, who wrote the song, who sang the song, how long it was, and it was very interesting. Then we had to work in conjunction with another part, and we had to read back and check it. But at the end of the day, I thought this is hardly an interesting job, and it had no future as far as I was concerned. But I was in Brunswick Records, and that's what I wanted.
And I guess you were hobnobbing with a lot of the personalities who were signed to the label.
Oh my! I was walking around with my eyes like saucers. I couldn't get over the people that I would see coming there. And I saw a lot of the stars. Fred Astaire used to fascinate me because he would come in and he would record and he would dance to that, and he always wore a tie instead of a belt. And I couldn't get over a man who was so thin that he could wear a tie instead of a belt around his trousers, but he would dance. He was fascinating. And there were a lot of stars. I would go home and say, do you know who I saw today? Bing Crosby, Morton Downey, Phil Regan, and I was thrilled with that job. I would have worked for nothing.
Cruising down the river on a Sunday afternoon, with one you love, the sun above, waiting for the moon. The old accordion playing a sentimental tune. Cruising down the river on a Sunday afternoon. The birds above all sing of love, a gentle, sweet refrain. The winds around all make a sound like softly falling rain. Just two of us together, we'll plan a honeymoon. softly falling rain. Just two of us together, we'll plan a honeymoon. Cruising down the river on a Sunday afternoon.
Music in the Morgan manner with Russ and his orchestra, and the vocal group the Skylarks with Cruising Down the River. On this next number we hear the orchestra and Russ vocalising with the song Oh You Crazy Moon.
When they met, the way they smiled, I saw that I was through. Oh, you crazy moon, what did you do? When they kissed, they tried to say that it was just in fun. Oh, you crazy moon, look what you've done. Once you promised me, you know, that it would never end. You should be ashamed to show your funny face, my friend. There we are, they fell in love. I guess you think you're smart. Oh, you crazy moon, you broke my heart.
Now, before Russ got to Brunswick, he was working with a number of other bands. Can you recall who he was recording with and playing with before he started at Brunswick?
He recorded and played with, I'm not quite sure how many recordings he made because they were not under his name, but he worked with Paul Whiteman, and that was his first time he went overseas. He worked with Paul Whiteman, and they went to London. He worked with the Scranton Sirens. I don't know if you've heard of Billy Lustig.
Yes.
Scranton Sirens.
Yes, yes.
And he worked with Paul Specht.
Yes, wonderful orchestra, Paul Specht.
He worked with more of the modern people at that time, with Ted Weems, Ted Figurita, Freddie Martin. And he was in demand all over because he was a marvelous musician and an arranger. He played trombone and piano and sang.
Now, I'm glad you touched on his arranging, because I wanted to ask you, I know that he was an arranger for a lot of well-known musicians and conductors. Could you tell us a little bit about that aspect of his life?
He loved arranging. Actually, what he wanted to do his entire life, he said, if he could afford to, he would rather just arrange, let somebody else front the band. But he arranged for Freddie Martin. He arranged for John Philip Sousa, who was the March King.
Yes.
And when I think he was 17 or 18 years old, and I don't honestly know how he got that job, but he did record, arrange for him. And an interesting sidelight to that, my grandson, Russell, named after my husband, is in the Army Band in the United States, and he's stationed now in Richmond, Virginia, at Fort Lee, and they did a concert the other day of all John Philip Sousa's arrangements, and Russell said, wouldn't this be marvelous if one of these arrangements my grandfather did for John Philip Sousa? I said, I don't know which one, but wouldn't that have been a wonderful story? But then he arranged for Fletcher Henderson, he arranged for Louis Armstrong, so he had a very wide repertoire of type of music. I mean, he could do arranging for the March King, he could arrange for Louis Armstrong, he could arrange for Fletcher Henderson, and then Freddie Martin.
Complete broad spectrum of music.
Yes, yes. Yeah. He loved it. That's what he would prefer doing.
Well, as you say, he had a love of music, and he originally started out, my notes tell me, as a coal miner, but he became a cinema pianist in his hometown. Tell us a little about that, and where was that? His
hometown was Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he thought he was going to follow his father's footsteps and be a coal miner. And when he was 13 years old, he was playing trombone at the time, and he went down to the coal miners and to the mines, and he used to bring the trombone down with him and play for the other coal miners until his father heard him one day, and his father was the foreman, and he said, who is making that noise down here? And they said, well, that's your son. They said, you're fired. So Russ said, okay, I don't know that I wanted to work here anyway. So he got a job, I think when he was 16 or 17 years old, playing piano in theaters before the music, the picture went on, or background music to the picture. He enjoyed doing that.
Right.
And he was very good at that. And then one day he was supposed to play for his sister's wedding. He was to play piano for sister's wedding, and his mother said, now, Russell, be careful, because you have to be in soon and play for May's wedding. And he said, all right, Ma, I'll be careful. He came in a half an hour later. He had broken his arm playing football. So, needless to say, that was his arm never did straighten out, and he said always that he could have been a concert pianist if it weren't for the fact that he had that crooked arm. But it didn't stop him from being a wonderful piano player.
You've mentioned his folks. Would some of his musical ability have perhaps come from the parents? Were they musical at all?
Oh, I definitely think so. His father was a drummer and worked in a lot of bands, not name bands, but maybe marching bands or Salvation Army or something.
Right.
And his mother was a wonderful piano player.
Oh, yes.
She was not a professional piano player, but she was a very fine pianist. His sister, May, his older sister, was an excellent piano player. She used to demonstrate music in the stores, play piano, and to demonstrate the sheet music. She never became a professional.
Right.
And his other sister was just a good musician, a singer, but his parents were both very musically.
Right. So his sister was like a song plugger there, I take
exactly,
it. Exactly,
right.
Yeah. And in fact, a lot of the older films where they tell the life story of the Gus Kahns and the Johnny Mercers and things like that show that did go on in New York, in Tin Pan Alley, where they were flogging the songs, because sheet music was really the way to go before the disc became prevalent.
Right, and they would be selling the sheet music, and she would play whatever somebody would come in and say, I'd like to buy this song.
Yeah.
How does it go? And May would be doing that.
How wonderful.
She's got eyes of blue, and that's my weakness now. She's got dimpled cheeks, I never cared for dimpled cheeks, but she's got dimpled cheeks, and that's my weakness now. Oh my, oh me, oh I should be good, I would be good, but gee. She likes to bill and coo, I never like to bill and coo, but she likes to bill and coo, and that's my weakness now. baby talk.
I never cared for baby talk,
But she talks baby talk.
and that's my weakness now.
Oh, she likes engagement rings.
I never liked engagement rings,
But she likes engagement rings.
and that's my weakness now.
Oh yes, oh yes,
Oh yes,
oh yes.
and we're heading for the parson's door, I guess.
She likes the family. I never liked the family, but she likes the family, and that's my weakness now.
Russ Morgan and the orchestra with That's My Weakness Now, with the vocal by Russ, ably assisted by the Heartbeats. Well, now Carolyn Clark takes centre stage to sing with the orchestra, You Got Me.
You got me, and I'm yours to keep. You got me, so I can sleep. I like you, you sweet such and such. I like you, too darn much. Love put that cinder in your eye while we sat on the hill. You made me a romantic girl, made me weak and so willing. You got me, I can't eat a thing. You got me, here I am on the brink, and if you let go I'll sing. You got me where you want me now.
Now, you mentioned about him breaking his arm, and the breaking of the arm and the therapy for that break was to do with the switch, I think, from piano to trombone. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, after he broke his arm, he was always subject in his entire life to bronchial attacks. He had, pardon me, he used to cough a lot, and he had this bad cold. And the doctors told his parents that probably if Russell took off over the trombone, that would build up his lungs and it would help. So he picked up the trombone and he started. He never took trombone lessons in his life. My son Jack, who is a very fine trombone player, can't understand. He said, I don't know how Dad could arrange and play and never take a trombone lesson. He was just self-taught in everything that he did. But he took up the trombone just to build up his lungs, and it built up his whole career.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
What other instruments did he play, Shirley?
He played organ, piano, and trombone fluently, but he could play any of the wind instruments. He could play saxophone, he could play trumpet. He arranged, obviously, for every instrument, but the organ, trombone, and piano were his main instruments.
Right, so that was his main one, and that gave him the most pleasure to play.
Yes.
Now, looking at the discography from the Joyce publication, it really starts in 1935, and he really did record a lot of material, didn't he?
Oh, yes. They recorded sometimes day and night. There was a studio up in uptown New York City that they would go to. When he wasn't recording actually for Brunswick Records, he'd go up to these other studios and do the transcriptions, and they would work hours and hours and weeks. That's how the musicians just kept alive, by doing all those transcriptions.
Yeah, these are the transcriptions that were specifically for radio station broadcast, weren't they? They weren't released to the public.
No.
But the quality of them was amazing.
Oh, they were wonderful studios. They were called Langworth transcriptions, and I don't remember the name of the others.
Associated is one, I think.
Yes.
And there's World and
right.
World Hillendale. Yeah,
right.
Yes. Now, while he was, as you say, the recording manager at Brunswick, did you go out on tour at all, or were you mainly confined to New York City?
No, that was before he had his orchestra. He was definitely confined to New York City.
Right, right.
He lived there and he just recorded there. Then at nighttime, he also always had a job. He would work at the recording studio during the day, but then he would join Freddie Martin at night.
And play with Freddie.
Or Phil Spitalny or all these other bands that I mentioned before, and play at the different hotels at night. So he was working day and night.
Yes. Phil Spitalny is a name that is familiar to me, but perhaps not to a lot of people. But he had some lovely recordings out.
Oh, I don't remember the recordings, but at one time he had an all-girl band.
Oh, yes.
And Russ always used to say that he worked for Phil Spitalny before he had the all-girl band. He was not part of that. But he had some very well-known, right now, Alex, I'm drawing a blank, but he had some very well-known musicians who... marvelous violinist, and he had a very fine band, and he spoke with such an accent you could hardly understand him. He was Russian, but he had good musicians. He was a good orchestra leader.
Let's talk a little bit about the singers that Russ's orchestra backed. And I know I have a couple of recordings with him backing Bing Crosby, but let's talk about some of the other people that you know that he backed.
Well, beside Bing Crosby was the Andrews sisters and Connie Boswell and the Boswell sisters.
Yes.
And Vera Lynn.
Yeah.
And Hildegard and Kitty Carlisle.
The Ames brothers.
Oh, the Ames brothers, right.
And of course.
And the Mills brothers.
Ed Ames came out of there, and he's still going, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are probably more I can't remember offhand, but I think that was the main ones.
Yes, yes. He enjoyed backing the prominent singers as
because
well?
he would do the arranging for them, and that was always a pleasure for him to do that too. He enjoyed that.
He loved arranging.
Yes, as I said I'm jumping some of your questions, but when Jack, our son, joined the band, and he was in the band for a couple of years, and Jack said, when I think that. Russ said that when I think that Jack has all his teeth, he said, I will give the band to him and I will just stay home and arrange and let him go on the road. But unfortunately, it never happened that way.
No. I note in the discography also that there was a switch from Brunswick to Decca Records, and I thought it was a change of labels, but this happened in 1938, and you can tell us the background as to what happened there.
Well, actually, Decca was a company in England, London, I imagine, and they bought Brunswick Records, and they changed the entire personnel of the employers and the recording people, and they did keep some of their key people. They kept my uncle Leonard Schneider, who was very responsible for keeping Russ on there, and but then they had Dave Kapp and Jack Kapp who were in charge. They were the president and vice president of Decca Records, and then Bing Crosby went with them, Russ went with them. In fact, practically all of the artists from Brunswick Record remained on with Decca and became it was a big, big company. I think at that time it was just probably Decca, Columbia, and Victor, and maybe that was all.
Yeah, there wasn't too many more.
No.
That covers it, and
Right.
they were giants, really, weren't they?
Yes.
Wonderful record companies.
So long, gee, I hate to see you go.
Music in the Morgan Manor. The life and music of Russ Morgan was written, produced and narrated by Alex Hare for Lanier Enterprises.
So long.
That just about does it. We've gone through our musical menu for today. Hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed singing and playing for you. Until the next time, when we present another melodic bill of fare featuring music in the Morgan Manor as the main dish, this is Russ Morgan saying so long.